Okay, great. There we are. We're live. Hey, everyone out there, LinkedIn land. It's another episode of Untangled. I am Jen Frazier, CEO, founder of Firefly Partners. I have been doing digital technology work with nonprofits since about 2008, and I started Untangled this summer as an opportunity to create spaces for me to chat with other folks, leaders, colleagues, allies in the space. So we talk about kind of outreach, technology, all the challenges that folks in the space are experiencing. There are several, but really related to technology and sort of what's going on in the social impact space with tech these days. And I'm very excited today to be joined by Maiya Holliday, founder and CEO of Mangrove Web. We are both women-owned B Corps and working with, social impact and mission-aligned businesses. And Maiya and I have got to know each other in the last couple of years, and very excited to sort of find those moments where you connect with folks in the space. You're like, how have we not known each other for like 20 years? Which we should have, but that's okay because now we do. So Maiya, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, so happy to see you as always, Jen.
Good to have you. So tell us a little bit more about you and your background and how you got to be running Mangrove.
Yeah, so I actually started in the nonprofit space and thought I was going to go into some sort of public policy or international development world, and ended up working on the website as one of many jobs, and that really made a lot more sense to me. And I created Mangrove on the premise that using technical and creative skills, which I was developing and which felt more aligned and natural for me, was the best way that I could contribute to change makers. And so, mangroves have this really complex root system that support an ecosystem of creatures, and it felt like that was the best way to describe like us being able to be this infrastructure to support nonprofits and B Corps and other purpose-driven organizations to do their best work. So we're really here. We do website design and development. We're here to really like amplify the work of others who are just out there doing important things in the world.
Yes, very similar missions and very closely aligned in what we do. So definitely kindred spirits. It's awesome as always. So we had lots of opportunities to think about topics for today's talk, and not so shockingly, as we were both just chatting about backstage, we were like, how do we talk about technology and sort of social impact work, or just technology in general right now in digital spaces, and not really need to sort of hone in on AI. And we've talked about AI several times on Untangled, but I was very excited to sort of hear and talk about Maiya and your experience specifically from a website and a web team's perspective. We have done a ton of web work in the past too. We're not doing that as much anymore. It's a lot more of the strategy side. And I feel like all my friends in the website spaces, sometimes I feel like, gosh, there's a little bit of fear. There's a little bit of, there's some anxiety and fear, but there's also opportunity to be like, the robots aren't coming tomorrow to start coding all your websites. The jobs are not like disappearing or anything, but it obviously is changing the nature of the work. But I like the title that you kind of came up with too, of like how clear thinking unlocks better tools for both the agencies and the nonprofits. So I wanted to sort of talk about that side of it and say, let's talk about the opportunities that you're seeing even within your own work a little bit, and then sort of how it sort of filters out into the work that you do with your clients using kind of different AI tools.
Yeah. So we've been focusing first on a lot of tooling internally because first of all, it's just clear what the ask is and what we need to do. And then that is then freeing us up to do more strategic work with clients. I think what will continually be important and something that AI can't replicate is obviously like the way that humans interact with each other, the way that we see all the nuances in understanding stakeholder feedback and in aligning different people within an organization towards the same goal, and making sure there's a shared understanding of like what the the website needs to be doing and how it can best serve the organization. And so, but what I see happening is the execution pieces getting streamlined over time. And the way that we're doing that internally is, we've been using AI coding tools like Cursor for over a year now, and we're able to just code faster because coding is a very formulaic, systematized thing that is perfect for AI, but there's also a lot of decision making in it. And so we're able to focus more on the technical strategy and the planning and being that human in the loop. And then the actual, we used to be like Googling things and copy pasting and editing code and figuring things out as we go. And there's a lot more sort of like autocomplete and reusing components and things like that, which makes me really happy, and you too, because we're into this like data streamlining and having data really synthesized and not having any repetitive pieces. So that's like the nerdy under the hood stuff going on. But there's also a lot of like interesting stuff going on between the design and dev teams, because design, like the designs that we have, we're able to build in variables that then like pass through to dev, and even the hierarchy of the content, which is really important for SEO, for accessibility, for usability, passing that through instead of having to like replicate it through different parts of the process. We're able to actually like set things as variables, kind of link different parts of the process together and actually retain information more easily and like pass it all the way through. And that just makes our work, it just makes for like less busy work internally, and it makes for more predictable and kind of accurate information. And it just lets us focus more on like what are the actual nuances of the project, what are all of like the human experiences and decades of experience that we have, that we can actually understand what the client's needs are and help like focus more on that instead of some of that busy work. So that's really exciting to me in terms of how we can serve clients. There's also like there's a tool that we've been building for ourselves internally that also will be kind of rolled out to clients at some point, which is just focused around like the content creation and like website, like a huge Achilles heel of websites has been creating content that not only is like on brand, on message, is accessible, is kind of tailored for SEO, all of that, but making sure that it's organized in such a way that it fits into the website design and structure, because otherwise it doesn't really carry through the design, and then it's hard to actually build it out. And it's really hard. There's a certain need for clients to be able to participate in a lot of that content creation, but it needs to be organized in a certain way. There's always been a little bit of tension there of like what the best way to do that is. And so one thing I'm really excited about is like we've been building something internally that's really alleviating some of that tension and really making that process easier for the way that we move, the way that we like organize content and then prep it to actually get it into the site much more seamlessly, which I'm really excited about, because
that's cool.
It's just been like a huge like pain in the butt thing.
Content is like there in the middle.
But it's not yet. So working on things like that and then being able to roll that back out to clients and make sure that we can like support clients to create even better content that's aligned with all of their goals and really fits into the site. Like those are the kind of things where I see like a lot of opportunity, and I'm really excited about it.
That all sounds totally awesome. I'm excited also to see what you're creating back there. We are also sort of doing similar type of things sort of behind the scenes, and we've got things we're using. We're like, can this turn into things that get rolled out, or are these just ways that we're using tools on the back end for ourselves? And same thing, we're kind of in the like a very exploratory mode right now to sort of say, what is it that can help us streamline? Obviously, I think we've hammered home the point many times, and I know folks are understanding you can't get rid of the human element in the way we do, the work, but there is some of that opportunity for streamlining and sort of, taking up some of that repetitive nature of some of the work, which I like, the concrete examples. I'm curious if when you're thinking about content specifically, I was just at a talk last week about taking traditional SEO ideas and sort of being like they're starting to, I mean, they're changing obviously rapidly as we talk about having content that's AI searchable and
Right.
ready for bots versus like a human interacting with the content on your site. Are you guys right now helping clients navigate that content creation process that's a little more like, so here's what it should look like for better scraping for AI versus like if a person, or how do you balance between like people are still going to look at your site, but also you need the content to sort of be ready for those bots as well. And they're not the same audience.
Yeah. We're getting into that in partnership with some of our like SEO partners, and the SEO landscape changes so quickly that we really rely on our partners to help us like kind of be up to date, the most up to date in that space. And so I think that will be something that becomes more of more part of the process as a rule. And the thing that I like about creating tools is that we can then go in and like add a layer to the tool where it creates a certain subset of information that's tailored to a different audience, whether it's bots or people. And from what I understand so far, and I'm honestly not an expert in this, but people that I work with are, that there's kind of a different subset of data that you can add as like a different layer on your website that's scraped differently, or different summaries of it that are picked up. And then you can still tailor a lot of the content like within the website and on the pages to humans that are actually browsing. So I think we'll continue to understand more about like what that balance is and where you put each type of content. And then we can build that in, like, instead of writing another like standard operating procedure or client manual about, then you have to go and create content that does we can
kind of do
just build that in as a rule in the tool that says, okay, now we're going to build that subset of data. You need to answer these questions. And then it goes. And I love nothing more than to have instructions about something like built into the process. So
totally. I mean, it's just, that was like a thing that kind of has come up. I'm like, I wonder how all my website friends are tackling, and all my content people, honestly. But it's like content on a website most specifically, but even just other like social posts and other ways in which you're putting content out on your whatever, your Substacks and your blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, is this for a human reader most of the time? And obviously it's a little bit of like place dependent, but also to your point, like you can and should be creating kind of both types of content. You don't have to do it all, manually on your own and whatever. And it doesn't have to be like some like slog. And there are tools that can help.
And it depends on what your goals are too. Like a lot of our clients, their sites are actually like validation tools where someone didn't actually find them through a search. They found them through like a human interaction, and then they're actually validating the organization or learning more about it on the website. And in that case, like the SEO content in general, or the AI SEO, I can't remember the acronyms because they keep changing, but that's like
GEO and the AEO.
There's like 5 of them now, but that content isn't as important. And so it's also good to just take a step. I know that SEO, like that landscape has always been such a buzzword, but it's also important to be like, is this actually serving us? Is this where we need to spend our time, or do we need to actually just go out and be connecting to people and driving them to our website that way? Because that's how we land like a $100,000 engagement or a partnership or something else that doesn't really happen through traditional SEO.
Right. So it's like, anyway, there's things to be thinking about, but it's cool to hear what you are doing internally. So how is it impacting, what you're seeing or opportunities you might see like for clients like out there, like nonprofits? I know there's a lot of just like, get your house in order and blah, 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 but like other sort of practical things that you're seeing folks doing, or?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I've learned through doing some of this tooling and workshopping internally is just how much you need to be really clear on like what the ask is and what the benefit is before you actually try to build the thing or bring in AI. Or I was saying this before, but it's like to you before the show, but it's like a lot of these things that are kind of pegged as AI are actually just like workflow integrations that have like a tinge of AI and are actually just getting easier to build because there's AI data mapping. So
Right.
for what I mean by that is you might have a workflow that you could have built in Zapier, or N8N or some other program that basically
Mhm.
just allows you to connect two different systems together and trigger things to happen. When this happens, then do this. So,
Right.
for example, it's like when a deal is marked as one, set up the intake documents for
Right.
it this way.
Yeah.
And it's getting a lot easier to create things like that because instead of having to go in and like write code or map things in a really particular way within those systems to
Right.
say this maps with this, and you can just more so describe it and actually let some of these AI tools like connect the
Go
dots
do
for
it.
you.
Yeah.
And so I see a lot of potential there, like for any organization, certainly nonprofits included. But I think the most important thing is to say, like, what am I doing on a regular basis where there's actually a lot of clarity around, like, in the process. And so
Mhm.
if you think of it in terms of I'm training a decently skilled intern, and in order for them to be able to do this job, I have to have like a very clear order of operations
Yep.
and standard operating procedure. And I have to also be clear about what the inputs are. So is it that like you have information in your brain that is driving this process that's not written down? Like write it down.
Yeah.
And are there other outside sources that you're, referencing something else and then coming back? Like make sure that that's included. So if in the process of doing this for ourselves internally, it's like, you know, made me focus back on like what are the actual things that like I'm personally bringing to this process? What are the other inputs, and then like what needs to happen exactly for this other thing to come out of it? And that
Mhm.
could be, for example, I've been thinking about like impact reports. And so
Mhm.
when we do our impact report, and a lot of clients as well, it's a combination of like qualitative and quantitative data.
Right.
And then you kind of want to look at it and say, well, where's the like how can we get the most value out of something being automated? Is it actually gathering the data? And does that mean we want to connect up like export reports from our, you know, QuickBooks and
Mhm.
analyze how much income is from this type of organization, or how, we have to track how much of our work comes from like nonprofits and purpose
Right.
driven organizations. Okay, well that means it has to actually be marked in the system as
Right.
such so that you can find that information, right? And then there's all this qualitative data of this storytelling. And so for us, a lot of things like happen in Slack or by email, or
Yeah.
um, I get like a ping about a podcast coming out and we maybe reference that later. And so there's also kind of an interesting way of like, where does all that information go? And then and then if it's all in one place, then you can reference it later and say, hey, go look at this Google folder where I dropped everything that happened throughout the year that had something to do with our impact report,
Right.
or go look through this Slack channel that's called Impact Report where I forwarded things and captured it there. If everything is in one place, then you can upload maybe your impact reports from years before and say, this is the way that we do it. Help ask me questions about like where the gaps are, and make sure
Mhm.
that yeah, and then use all the data that's in like this space where I
Yeah.
amalgamated it, and then help me create it for this year. And so it's really just about understanding like and you can't do that unless you have clarity around like what the output should look like
Right.
and what the inputs are, and then all the inputs need to be somewhere that's actually accessible by AI, and then you can actually build something that's useful.
Right. Well, but I think that's, there's so many good points in there about the way that you're collecting
Hmm.
information, the way that you're sort of like, we just have a lot of also just running notes. We have Slack channels, so obviously for every client, every project. We also just have all these sort of running notes about weekly check-ins with clients and status updates and outcomes and all these things. And you're right, they're sort of in a variety of places. And so the
Hmm.
ability to say, hey, kind of come through and comb through these different spaces and needs to sort of, you need to then think about the inputs. Yeah. So you're like, how am I putting this in a less scattershot way so that it's organized, tagged appropriately, has some of those maybe keywords. So you can be like, I'm looking for information about X type of organization or something like that. So you obviously need to make sure that you're talking about that client that fits that category in that way, so that the AI has something to like latch onto and be like, okay, great. I'm going to see this when I go sift through all this content. So it just makes you a little more conscious of how you're sort of doing your own sort of note taking and collecting of information, whether it's financial. So it's the qualitative and the quantitative. And you think about, because I think it makes you think about the output, which then organizes your input. So you're like, oh, if I'm thinking about trying to, which we've all done in sort of different ways, about like, I'm going to try and write a report about this, or I'm going to write a case study about this. In the future, changes the way you think about the information you're collecting or how you're collecting it sometimes in that project. But this is like a broader way to look at it potentially.
Yeah. And it's like, it's creating kind of this framework and guardrails for, or like a container for the way that you maybe continue to organize information moving forward, so that the next time you do it, it's that much easier.
Yeah.
Because so many of these things, like, we have a lot of information about what the outcome should be, but it's either in our own heads or it's in a lot of different places. And I mean, back to the intern thing, it's like, it's exactly the same if you bring someone in and say, okay, I need you to start putting this stuff together and start to organize it. And you'll get 50 questions about, okay, well, where's this? Should I include this?
Yes.
Like, is that important? And then there's gaps in it. And so back to like, is AI taking our jobs and this and that? Like, there's gonna be this layer of like strategic directives and sort of engineering the process. And that doesn't have to be at like a developer engineer level necessarily, but just overseeing, like, we have so much inherent knowledge of our own organization or the industry or whatever, that it's really easy to take for granted. And so it's I was talking to a woman at a conference a couple months ago, and she was about to go on maternity leave, and she said that she was creating kind of her own GPT where she just brain dumped a bunch of information. I think she just voice added a lot of stuff, and then added some written content. And then over time, as her employees asked her questions, she put it in there, and then she answered it. And then she basically created a GPT that answers the things the way that she would answer them. So that while she was on maternity leave, there was like sort of a 70 to 80% success rate of actually answering things the way that she would think about it, because there was a record of the way that she actually answered things before. And I thought that was so cool, because
that's a smart idea. Yeah.
And there's obviously a lot of really nuanced decision making at a leadership level, or department director, or anything else. But there's also a lot of like patterns that we don't always see. And I think one thing that I find really cool about AI is that pattern recognition, because I think that it's so hard for us to parse out, like, to just define and parse out like the way that we would respond to something, especially with a lot of like storytelling, or just kind of ambiguous content that comes out of us. And so I think there's something really interesting that can apply to a lot of different organizations, of kind of having a space where we're brain dumping a lot of information, and then you're like, please help me synthesize like how, what things are important, how I make decisions. Like, you can continue to refine it over time in a lot of different ways. But I think just seeing those patterns is also really interesting.
Super helpful. I like the conversation I had last week was sort of ties into this one, really exactly the same thing about like, that was a lot more like systematic mapping out your processes so that it's more clear. But that's similar here. It's kind of, variations on a theme of just organizing the way in which you do work and how everybody approaches things. And it feels like, there's a lot of, my guest last week's main mantra was like, get it out of your head, and get it, documented somewhere. It doesn't need to be on some, giant tome that you've written that's sitting on a shelf somewhere. Obviously we want living, breathing, accessible ready to interpret, easy formats that you can ask and get, that's, I think, a good thing about AI too, is like, you can be like, here's all this stuff. I'm trying to find the answer to this question and answer, what about this process? How can I find my way to this? And then that goes, and they can sift through like a bunch and find it pretty quickly, where you're like, oh, good. But if it's been documented well, it can be, the question can be easily answered. But that's, again, this whole input to output thinking, like, when am I going to need it? When people are trying to train people, like different tasks around processes that you're doing as an organization, to be like, oh, I need to make sure that we document this, not just when someone's leaving or when they're going out on maternity leave, or there's like a gap. It's one of those things you have to kind of force yourself into, be like, oh, I really need to do this, kind of just as a matter of course. And that is hard to make time for that. But it's like, this future you is going to thank you for taking the time to walk and talk that through, so that other people can access the information later. You can get better information out of what you're putting in. So it's a lot of like clarity, but I loved a lot of the things you also put in sort of our notes about clarity around your mission, and clarity around understanding about why and how you want to start using AI. I think that's the same thing. That's our sort of mantra, listeners. If you're listening to this, sure, week in and week out, the idea of how to use AI most effectively is getting really clear.
Yeah. And I know we're getting to time, but one quick thing I can share is make a little table somewhere and write down all the things that you do really repetitively, and kind of try to capture like how much time it takes everyone collectively each week, what the impact would be if it was automated, like how critical it is. You can assign numbers to each of these things, and ease to implement. You might not know the ease to implement, but if you know it, you can put it in there. And then like try to prioritize from there, and then just focus on one thing. And so, and try to start small. Like if it's, try to just choose something that's like really, you can be really successful, and you can just to understand like how things work, and what's possible. And then I think that really opens up the thinking amongst like maybe yourself, and maybe more importantly, other people in the organization, of like, oh, wow, like maybe I didn't realize that this actually could be a lot easier. And so that's something that we could invest in next. And maybe we need help to do that, which is fine. But just identifying what those things are, and what just feels like, man, I should not be spending my time on this because I have other more strategic, important things to do. Try to find those things.
Yeah. Totally. I think that's also forces the conversation, or it should be an opportunity to have those conversations, and then sort of look at what's happening and what's bubbling up for people across the organization, not just sort of in a silo over here and this team's doing this, but like, what are the things that can kind of help us more generally as a place to start? And we also like to advocate for sort of low risk projects that are easy to experiment with, and sort of see where you can start to gain some of this. And then once you get more familiar with the in and out, it helps inform that next, maybe more complex thing, or, a little bit higher level thing that you're looking to solve. Once you tackle some of the, like time consuming stuff that, you don't really want to be spending your time on, but somebody has to do it right now. You want to train your intern. One of my clients calls it her intern Chad, that she has trained really well to do certain tasks. So I think that's a nice way to think of it. But thank you for some of the practical, kind of tangible ways that you're using it, and the ways that you're sort of seeing opportunities for some of our clients to really, jump in and start using it. We definitely advocate for curiosity mindset, and like sharing and creating a space inside your organization or company that's really like, what are we learning? What's happening? And sharing and creating, conversational spaces about it regularly, and not having it, a team over here and a silo over there, and just really using it as an opportunity for openness, collaboration, and alignment across teams. So
keep sharing, create like a Slack channel or a little meetup, and once a month, and like this is what I did with AI this week. Just like you have to spark that like curiosity and openness in other people on your team, and you'll get a lot out of it.
You will. All right. Thank you, Maiya, so
Good to
much
see
for
you.
all of your amazing insights. I will be, putting some links to your websites and stuff like that so people can find you, but definitely really excited to hear and follow and kind of think about your content tool that you're kind of creating as well and see when that
I'll give
might
you behind the scenes. It's fun.
come out for client use, which would be pretty exciting. So next week I'll be here joined by Mason Weintraub, Senior Director, Digital Enterprise Community Partners. And we're going to talk about digital leadership in uncertain times. I'm sure AI will come up again because it's definitely a space where leadership needs to shine in this space, but very excited to also talk about just, that from what's happening in the world, how are we handling it, and the role of leaders in these digital spaces when things are on such a rapid evolution as well, and what that looks like to be an effective leader in these times. So next Thursday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, another episode of UnTangled. And Maiya, again, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
No worries. Thanks, Jen.
Everybody out there, have a great rest of your Thursday.